regardless of whether you're a young whippersnapper, a spring chicken, vintage, seasoned, a golden ager, just feeling gosh darn right elderly, or wishing you could be a time traveler. It doesn't matter how old or young you are, knowing what child's pose is, knowing if you can get into or out of child's pose is important, even if you don't like yoga. Even if you've never been to a yoga class and you never have any intention of going to yoga. So today we're going to talk about why this is important, what you can learn from child's pose. And if you know what I'm talking about, you'll understand why sometimes you can get into a yoga class, try this pose, and feel crazy because the instructor goes into it and they look like they're taking a nap and you might be dying like this hurts. Before we dive into all those tactics, come with me, my dears, on a journey of child's pose. Welcome to my classroom. All right, let's get ourselves into child's pose. I'm first going to head on down to the floor. Oh, yes, the floor. I'm going to get down on my hands and knees. So I'm on the floor on my hands and knees. My hands, imagine this with me. My hands are on the floor right underneath my shoulders. My arms are straight. My shoulders are hovering over my hands. My spine is in a neutral spine position, essentially straight. My hips are over my knees, so my back makes essentially a tabletop. I stay right there, bring my shoulder blades together behind me, straighten out my neck. This is not child's pose yet. From here, keep those hands on the floor exactly where you are. Take your big toes, swing them in so that the insides of your big toes touch each other. Now, here begins the fun. Take your hips, sit back onto your feet as best as you can, keeping your hands right there on the floor, bringing your hips down to your feet as close as you can. Sit down as far as you can. If that's super difficult, you're perfect. You stay right there. Don't go any further. If you have more in you, take those elbows. Keep the hands right where they are. Drop the elbows down to the floor while keeping your hips sitting on your feet. Nice. If you want to, spread those knees a little bit wider. Give your belly some room so you can breathe. If you're having trouble breathing because your belly's getting squished, back it off a little bit. We want to always breathe. Stay right there. If this is challenging for you, don't go any further, but we're still working our way into a full child's pose. If you want to go further, stay right there. Keep your hips by your feet. Take those arms, reach them away from you. Keep the hands on the floor. Reach those arms far away from you until your arms are straight. Let the forehead drop down towards the floor. If you're lucky, you can keep your hips on your feet, your head on the floor, your arms reaching up overhead. Take a nice big inhale. Exhale, relax. Yeah, right. For most of us, for a lot of us, if we cannot get all the way into child's pose, this can become so painful in so many ways. And what happens in class, a lot of times, if you go to a yoga class, a lot of our yoga instructors, because they've been doing yoga, they've got amazing joint mobility. They've got amazing flexibility. And a lot of them are skinny, so their belly doesn't get in the way. So they get into this child's pose and they can actually relax into that full child's pose. And they could literally take a nap. It's that relaxing. However, let's talk through all the things that could go wrong for you with child's pose in this context of just having it as a point of awareness. Okay, here we go. This is going to be fun. The reason this is important is because that full pose we talked through really does put our bodies in a position that it is meant to be able to move. And if you're not able to get into that child's pose, that means there's something in your body that's holding you back. And it's not something to beat ourselves up over and get into that negative self-talk. Oh, look at me. I got all these issues. I just can't. Nope. We don't go there. That doesn't serve us. We sit up tall. We take a big inhale and we tell ourselves, okay, I'm going to dissect this child's pose with Lynn on this podcast today so that I can determine what might be going on with me, what might be something I can improve versus what's just a normal limitation of mine. So let's get to it. If you want to go back and listen to that going into child's pose again, it starts at the 1 minute mark of this podcast. And then at the very end of this podcast, we'll go through it again another time so you can give it a try now that we've talked through it. Okay, here we go. Here's the tactic. It's like a little workshop here. The first step is being able to get down on the floor on your hands and knees in a way that's pain-free. So that could be a lot of different things. That could be how flexible your hips are. That could be how flexible and mobile your knees are. That could be how flexible and mobile your ankles are. Getting down onto the floor requires a certain amount of strength around your stomach, your behind. It requires strength in your legs. It requires the ability to actually bend your hips, bend your knees, bend your ankles. And if you've got good mobility and you can get onto the floor easy, just pretend. Just take like your knees and pretend that you cannot bend your knees past 90 degrees and try to get on the floor. Just take one knee and say, I can only bend this one knee halfway. I cannot bend it the full way. Try to get yourself up and down from the floor. You will have so much respect for people who don't have that mobility to do that. Okay, so that's the first piece. So there's a lot of different work to get down on the floor. Getting onto our hands and knees. Some folks have joint issues in their knees that makes putting any weight on their knees in that position very, very painful. So if that's you, one of the things that you can do is double up on a yoga mat or get a thick foam mat or a blanket. A lot of yoga classes have these like big old cotton blankets that you roll up several times. Put that under your knees so your knees have more support. And don't get hurt. Another thing that can go wrong with child's pose. I know this is supposed to be the most gentle one, but I really want you to be able to do child's pose. It's an important mobility piece. The other one is when you're on your hands and knees, the wrists. A lot of people, it hurts their wrists or their wrists are, it's not hurting their wrists, but their wrists feel painful and the palms of their hands feel painful. Some of that could be osteoarthritis or rheumatoid arthritis. Some of it could be just general joint inflammation from autoimmune diseases. Some of it could be, I know, Google it. There we go. Here's a trick though. The hands on the floor, a lot of times people think I need to put a cushy mat under my hands because my wrists hurt. Not necessarily true. There's a couple things you can do here when you get on the hands and knees. One is sometimes cushy mats actually drive more of the work into the wrists and it makes the wrists hurt more. So one thing, if you have nothing to grab near you to help you, try putting more weight, not in your wrists, but shift weight into the ball of your hands and into all 5 fingers. Spread all 10 fingers nice and wide on that floor and try to press a lot more weight in there. So over time, you'll get more strength in the muscles in those wrists that aren't used to being used that way. And it actually, for most folks, it usually will get a whole lot better over time. Should never, ever be painful. So come off those wrists if it is painful, but otherwise should get a whole lot better. Another thing you can do is if you have some kind of some way to prop your hands up a few inches, that can make a big difference. So this is where something like a yoga block could be really great to have. It props your hands up about 4 inches off the floor and it takes a ton of weight off. Okay, next, taking the toes together and touching them behind you. Most people don't have trouble with that. If you do, that could be some pretty significant hip mobility that we want to be aware of. So if you're on your hands and knees and you just can't get those big toes to touch together behind you at all, know like, oh, I got some hip mobility I need to work on. Next, draw the hips towards the feet and try to sit on the feet. Oh, mama. There's so much going on here. If your knees won't bend all the way, that could be a knee joint mobility, or it could be that you have really tight quads. Quads are the top of your thighs. So you're sitting in a chair right now, probably. Take your hands, pat them on the top of your thighs. Yeah, those are your quads. Some folks, those quads are so tight that when they go into sitting on their feet for child's pose, their behind will not go down to their feet because it pulls so much and it's painful. You want to be careful not to overdo it. I know. Who would have thunk all these things? Some folks, when they get on their hands and knees, they can actually get their behind to their heels, but holy cow, their ankles hurt so bad. So that could, of course, be an arthritis thing, a joint inflammation thing. Sometimes folks, especially as we age, those ankles lose mobility. So the ability to point those ankles so the toes go away from your leg, that's the pointing thing. Some people can't actually get their foot so that it is the bottom of the front of the leg is in a straight line with the top of the foot. And so they actually feel, when they're in that position, they actually feel like their ankle is going to break because they don't have that mobility. Now, this is why being able to do child's pose is so important, and why I want you to go back and listen to this demo and try it again at the end of class, because you want to always be able to do that. Because when you lose that ankle mobility, or you lose that quad flexibility, or you lose that knee mobility, it throws off so many other things. So this child's pose is a great way to just test some of our flexibility, mobility pieces. And that ankle mobility is super duper important for our whole life. And it's super duper common to ever so slowly and sneakily lose mobility in things like our ankles. And we blink and 20 years has gone by and we realize, oh my gosh, my ankles aren't as mobile as they were 20 years ago. Sometimes that mobility can come back with a lot of work and time and practice, but we just never know until we start working it. And it usually takes months and months and months to really injury-free get more mobility back into it. Doable. It's usually not all lost, but super important. This is why it's super important to just know this child's pose every now and then, do it your whole life, check in on it, see how that mobility is going. Okay. So now let's say you're lucky enough, you got your butt on your ankles. There we go. Your hands are still on the floor. You're going to draw your elbows down towards the floor, also keeping your hands in place. Now, what's going to happen here is this is going to test spine mobility and more flexibility of your behind, your spine, your shoulders. That's what's going to start getting tested here. If when you drop your elbows down to the floor for that next phase of this, if you feel your behind coming up from your feet, that could probably be some kind of a glute, lower back, spine mobility thing. Or it could simply be you're not used to moving your body this way, and you got to tell yourself, okay, elbows down, butt stay on feet. Elbows down, oop, butt's trying to come up. Butt back on feet, elbows down. Yeah, it can feel kind of clunky. All right. Typically in a yoga class, you skip the elbows down part, but I found the more folks I work with, I like doing that as another milestone because it just kind of helps see the progression. Then, here we go. If you can keep your behind on your feet, and here's another thing that happens. A lot of folks feel their stomachs getting squished and they feel like they can't breathe. So take those knees, spread them wide, give room for that belly to go in between those legs. If your belly is still too squished, you are going to back off of this until you can breathe. You always want to be able to breathe. If you get into child's pose and you feel like you're getting suffocated and you're squished, first of all, not being able to breathe is never a happy day. Never a good thing. We never say never except this. You always want to breathe. Okay. Now, The not being able to breathe can be a couple things. One is it could just be you've got belly fat, you got leg fat, it's getting squished, your lungs are getting squished, makes it hard to breathe. Okay, so you just back off of it and call it good. It could also mean that you're still working on gaining good core stabilizing muscles in your stomach, in your deep core, and especially your diaphragm. That's that muscle. Most people know, they're aware of diaphragm. That's that muscle that is underneath your lungs, is what expands and contracts your lungs. So some folks may not have a belly or may have a belly. Either way, they'll go into child's pose, but their internal organs get squished up towards their lungs and their diaphragm isn't strong enough to hold all that in place. And so it's pushing up into their lower lungs and they're like, I don't like this. It kind of hurts. Yeah. So if that's you, it could be because you've got extra weight and it's squishing you, or it could be you've got extra weight, it's squishing you, and you have a weak diaphragm. It could be you have no extra weight on you at all, and just getting into that position makes it harder for you to breathe. Lots going on there. So it's a nice just kind of check of some basic core strength for you. Okay, you've made it all the way down. You're on your elbows. Your forehead is going towards the floor. You can still breathe. Let's go into that full child's pose then. Behind stays right where it is on your feet. Forehead stays on the floor. You take those arms, you slide them palms facing down away from you. Those elbows will probably come up off the floor because your arms are straight and your hands are reaching far away from you. Yeah, you know it. You're with me. Shoulders. That's right. Shoulders, elbows. If you've got limited range of motion in your shoulders, if you've got rotator cuff issues, if you've got all kinds of different things could be happening in your shoulders. I know I'm holding you there. Keep those arms reached out. If you're doing this with me, you're reaching those arms out over there. This is a good test to see how those shoulders are. Also, I'm going to just metaphorically put my hands down here. Your rib cage and your ribs connecting to your sternum. A lot of folks have issues where they feel the center of their chest hurting so bad because the connection points of the rib cage connecting to that sternum, which is the middle of your chest, kind of in the middle of your chest. For women, it's like between your boobs right there. Men, same spot. Those can be weak sometimes and be painful. So for some folks, they get really sharp pain in their chest when they do child's pose. Now let's pretend we made it all the way into child's pose. Take a nice big inhale. Exhale. Whew. And then let's metaphorically just come back up and sit down, and we'll talk about this just a little bit more, and then I'll talk you through child's pose one more time. Who would have thunk that child's pose had so much going on and so much to it? So my message for all y'all is this. Whether or not you do yoga, this child's pose, which we're about to do again together here, is super important because it's one of the basic tests to see what your body can do. And it's something you really want your body to be able to do for as long as you can. I mean, 80 years, 90 years. If you keep doing this all the time for your whole life, you are going to be more flexible. You are going to feel better. And the cool thing about it is if you can't get on the floor, you can do this in your bed. You can do this on your couch. I mean, it's a little squishy, a little not as stable, but you can totally do it. Super important to do this as best as you can. Alrighty, let's do it again. And in your mind, join me in my metaphorical yoga studio, and we will do child's pose together once again. Okay, From wherever you are, let's work our way down to the floor on our hands and knees. If you can't get down onto the floor, then you can do this on your bed, on your couch, just a place where you feel safe and secure. I'm down on my hands and knees. My hands are shoulder width apart. My arms are straight. My shoulders are hovered over my hands. My knees are hip width apart. My hips are right over my knees. My spine is straight in a neutral spine position. That's called tabletop. We're going to go into child's pose now. We're going to stay right there. Keep those hands on the floor. Keep those arms straight. Sit your hips back down onto your feet as you bring your big toes together and let the insides of your big toes gently touch together. Take those hips, sit back as far as you can. Only go until your body says that's enough, and then stay right there. Nice big inhale. Exhale. If you're able to sit all the way on your feet, go ahead and do that. If this is super challenging, you've gone as far as you're going to go today. Stay right there. If you'd like more, then keep your behind on your feet and drop those elbows down to the floor, keeping those hands in place. Don't move the hands at all. Nice. Keep your behind again on your feet, elbows down to the floor. You're going to feel your back stretching out. Nice big inhale. Exhale. If this is super challenging, stay there, go no further. If you want more, drop your chin, let your forehead go towards the floor as far as it can while keeping your hips, your behind back as far as you can. Inhale, exhale. Stay right there. If you are super challenged, you can flirt with going between head to the floor, hips to your ankles, head to the floor, hips to your ankles. You can kind of go back and forth and just slowly work the body to where you can finally someday get the hips to the ankles and the head to the floor. If you want to go into the full child's pose now, keep the hips to the ankles. Keep your forehead on the floor. Take those hands, slide them away from you on the floor till your arms are mostly straight and your hands are reaching far away from you. Your elbows will probably come up off the floor. Your hands stay on the floor. Make sure you can breathe. Back it off if you can't breathe. Stay right there. Inhale. Exhale. Let it relax as best as you can, even if you're in that very first position. Everybody slowly walk your hands towards your body. Slowly come up to seated. If it's painful to sit on your feet, unhook those feet and have a seat down on the floor. I'm going to sit up nice and tall. If you're still working to sit up on your sit bones with me, take your time. Otherwise, have a seat in a chair or just cross your legs on the floor. Shoulders up, back and down. Let's do a couple shoulder rolls, up, back and down. Shoulders up, back and down. Seated nice and tall. Draw the top of your head to the ceiling. Take those arms, reach them up to the sky for a giant big inhale. Exhale, let those arms float down to your side. Stay right there. Take your chest, your heart, always hold it up high. Remind yourself you are worthy of this thing called health and fitness. It's never too late to improve. It's perfectly good to love ourselves right where we are. And know you are not alone. We're right here with you. That's child's pose, my friends. There's a lot more where that came from at couch2active.com. We do tons of group fitness every week on Zoom. I'm one of the instructors. You just got a little freebie, quick little sneak peek sample of what it's like to be in one of our classes. So head on over to couch2active.com. If you haven't done that yet, check us out. It would be my honor. Whether you can see, whether you're blind, or whether you're visually impaired, it doesn't matter. We don't care. We make it work for all y'all. Alrighty, that's couch2active.com. Have a good day.